Hey everybody, this is Sam and Raphael, and today we sat down with the mayor of Butchertown himself, Andy Beden, who's played a huge role in the revitalization of the Butchertown neighborhood over the last 25 years, including the redevelopment of what's now the Ten20 Brewing building and the Butchertown Market. Butchertown is one of the more historic areas in the city of Louisville, and it was originally designated as the east end of Louisville back in the 1800s and early 1900s when the city was still centered around downtown and West Louisville.
And that historical charm is a large piece of what makes it unique on the residential and commercial sides of the market. With the new Louisville City Stadium, the waterfront botanical gardens, 1020 Brewing, and a myriad of local bars, restaurants, shops, and restored housing, Butchertown is booming, and we've got the inside scoop on what's coming next. This is your monthly neighborhood update with Sam Heine and Rafael Collazo.
Folks, welcome back to another episode of Street Talk. We are down in the heart of Butchertown today with the unofficial mayor of Butchertown himself, Andy Beden.
Wildly unofficial.
Wildly unofficial, yet official. Some call him the president, some call him the mayor.
The Baron.
Prime Minister.
The Baron of Butchertown.
Yeah, depending on who you're talking to. He's had his hands all over Butchertown since the late 90s and played a major role in revitalizing the area since then to what it is today, and we're excited to have a conversation with him and catch up.
Thanks.
I'm
thrilled to be here.
Good.
I feel like we're on NPR.
I know. It's
a little bit. It's kind of cool.
It's very official.
Uh-huh.
So you bought what is now the Butchertown Market building back in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Major catalyst in propelling this neighborhood forward to what it is today. So I guess maybe a natural question to start with is what compelled you to go with Butchertown back at that point? Was it the building, that opportunity specifically, or something you saw?
I got to tell you, everything comes down to opportunity. Everything is opportunity. So that was a building that had not been on the market for 45 years. And, a lot of these buildings in Butchertown are long hold buildings that haven't been available or on the market. So one thing I've learned in real estate, I think, is it's all opportunity driven. You can't buy a building that's not for sale. And I don't have the money to buy a building that's not for sale. Yeah. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So everything's opportunity. So this is I'm maybe the fifth owner of this building since 1880. It was the National Leather and Tanning Company, and then it was the Magic Flake Soap Factory, and then it was the Lambton Paint Company, and then it was Caudell Seed, and I bought it from Caudell Seed. And I did not go into the purchase saying, oh, I'm going to, change this neighborhood, or I'm going to, start a movement that other people will be interested in, jumping onto the bandwagon. I mean, there was none of those thoughts. It was a building that was on the market for a long time, and they kept kind of lowering the price. And I had a business at the time that could use it. And, everything came together where I used to work for a guy, and he would say, whenever you buy a piece of real estate, you're high bidder for the day. So, I was high bidder for the day, and I got it. And one of the things that I thought about was to rebuild the building would cost maybe 20 times what I was buying it for, with the quality of the brick and, the first growth timbers. And so it was really a beautifully built building that had great bones. I bought it from Caudell Seed, and the fifth time I was there, I came into this area of about 1,000 square feet, and they had maybe 15 offices. So it was like a sweatshop, right? And so there was a guy there, and I hear this psst, psst, and I'm like, me? And he's like, yeah, come in here. And so he was in an office that had a furnace in it, like the HVAC furnace. And he said, is there anybody in your organization you don't like? And I said, yeah. And he said, put him in this office. Right? Mm-hmm. And then I left, and I thought, I wonder if that guy knows they hate him.
Yeah, right.
How self-aware. But I ended up tearing out all those offices, so nobody had to suffer the fate of that poor guy.
Nice.
But anyway.
Starting fresh.
Right.
Yeah.
So, just those kinds of stories, when you're looking at something. But it ended up being one of the best things that I've ever done from a standpoint of, a good value. But I had no idea how much money I would have to put into it. I mean, it took millions of dollars, which I didn't have. And so I always say, I'm glad I didn't know then what I know now, because I probably would have thought it was impossible to do it. And then that would have changed a lot of trajectories of a lot of businesses that have located here.
Yeah, that butterfly effect in that way.
So, and just offline, we were talking a little bit about the first mover, not necessarily first mover advantage, but the act of being the first mover is often taking a big risk that at the time may not seem. I mean, it may seem like a big risk, and maybe you don't really understand all the different verticals that you can explore on that side. But obviously, your willingness to do that has been a big catalyst for the area, and obviously, for those of you guys who are listening and haven't necessarily been, because we have people who are tuning in from not just Louisville but other parts of the country as well. Butchertown is located adjacent to downtown, and Butchertown itself has a unique history, which I'm sure you could speak to, as far as what it was used for many years. And along the waterfront, there was a lot of industrial uses. There were a lot of meat processing. That's kind of where the Butchertown name comes from. Meat processing and packaging district, very close to downtown. So there's obviously a lot of unique arteries in the area that would have supported a revitalization of the area. But at the time, and you could speak to that, I'm sure, is that it was not where it is today. Where now it's one of the hot spots of Louisville. So
for sure. I mean, Butchertown was created because there's a lot of German immigrants, and they located in the Butchertown neighborhood. There was also a neighborhood called The Point that ended up being lost in the flood of 36, right? And so, I mean, an entire neighborhood was just underwater and never came back. So there was more density here, and there was like a German beer bar on every corner. I'm talking every corner. And there was like, so it was high concentration German immigrants, and Beargrass Creek ran through the middle of the neighborhood, and there would be these slaughterhouses and meat processing plants and stockyards, and they would like dump everything into Beargrass Creek, and it would go to the Ohio and empty out. And so that's why the location, it was cheaper than downtown real estate, and lots of families, and lots of Catholic churches, and that's sort of how it got started. So I mean, they used to like run pigs down Story Avenue, like herds of pigs and herds of sheep and cows, and all these different livestock, and that's what it was. And at one time there was like 22 meat rendering plants, and so there was a huge Ortles 92 beer is the brewery still standing, and there's tons of breweries, all in Phoenix Hill and all around. So it was just sort of a magnet, and they built these great brick buildings. And so that's sort of how Butchertown got its name. And, it still smells.
Yeah.
Some days.
Still, yeah.
But I got to tell you, when I bought the building in 98, it was just unbelievably worse. It was really, on a hot day, it was really bad. And I think that was one of the things why the building was on the market so long. And I think I maybe had sinus problems, and I'm like, I don't think it smells bad. Today I smell money.
Right. Didn't you say, like when you bought it, there was 5 or 6 meat processing plants, and that, because I think Butchertown has this stigma where people are just like, oh, it smells so bad down there, but I'm around here all the time, and it doesn't smell nearly as bad as what it smells.
It's a million times better, and so that's just sort of one of those things that just persists because it got such a bad rap for so many years that it's just like baked into everybody's psyche. And JBS is there, and they're a good neighbor to us, and they employ 1,200 people, and they have a lot of first wave immigrants, and they speak like 35 different languages. So it's definitely a true melting pot. And, if it ever is odoriferous, I'll give them a call and say, hey, and, they'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And those days are a lot fewer and far between. And, we have the soccer stadium that's been built now. So there's a lot more noses in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So, and I think, JBS still has a place in the neighborhood for sure. And they're, like I said, they employ a lot of people and they're good neighbors and we get along great with them and they do a lot of things for the neighborhood. But there's some people that, want them to move and hate them.
Yeah.
So, but there was, when I bought the building, like 4 weeks after I bought the building, my wife at the time, I was taking a shower and she came up with the Courier Journal and she said, oh, I did not realize that Stockyards is being sold to Home of the Innocents. I apologize because I didn't think you knew what you were doing. And I said, Stockyards is being sold to who? And she goes, oh, you're an idiot. You didn't know. And then she threw the paper in the shower.
Yeah.
Because she was a little miffed.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know. I mean, but it was like a huge development.
Yeah.
And Home of the Innocents is an amazing neighbor and a great, a great hospital and great for the kids and has, their mission is amazing.
Yeah.
And so they took the Stockyards, got rid of all that, and Melwood, Fisher was there. There were just tons of places that are no longer there. So it's definitely a neighborhood that is undergoing a transformation. And then, of course, with Gil Holland and Nulu, I mean, Nulu's on fire.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And has been, a lot of exciting things are going on there, like Rabbit Hole and, a lot of the new hotels, and there's just tons of stuff. It's just a cool place to be right now.
Absolutely. And the cool thing about kind of the history of both Nulu and Butchertown is because they were kind of industrial in nature, the zonings in those areas support a variety of different uses. So, if you get it here in Louisville, it's an easy one zoning, allows you to do a variety of different things. You can pretty much do whatever you want. So the fact that you had this catalyst that then spread out, it allows for new developers to come in and say, oh, well, now we can do something really cool in this area because the zoning supports that revitalization effort. So
Kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, not all the zoning is good.
No, sure. I guess.
But for the majority, it's way easier to downzone than to upzone.
Sure.
Right? So it's easier to do commercial developments if you're starting industrial. But it's still tough to navigate the rezoning. And you have to do it, and, nothing's really easy.
No, and I hope I didn't come off.
No.
I hope I didn't come off as it was easy, but it was something that I think obviously you can.
No, I
you can
just
speak
did a
to.
rezoning, and I'm like, that was not easy.
Yeah, it took you a long time. I'm
Right,
sure.
and a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Other than that, it was smooth as could be.
I'm sure.
Smooth as silk.
So one of the things I'm kind of curious about is we obviously referenced Butchertown, Market. So could you kind of describe what you have done with Butchertown Market and some of the evolution of I guess the different businesses that are operating within the space?
Yeah, so we bought the Butchertown Market, and we were using it as a manufacturing facility initially, and that didn't work out. So I had found some tenants to lease space in there, and so I had like maybe 4 tenants, and this was super early in my career, and we had a visit from the fire marshal, and he inspected the property, and 5% of the building was not sprinkled, and if 5% is not sprinkled, it counts as 0% sprinkled.
Wow.
And nobody was in the area that wasn't sprinkled. I, had sprinklers wherever there was people, and it was up to date and working and stuff, but I didn't know. And so he said, and we didn't have the correct fire alarms, and we didn't have the staircases were too narrow for ingress and egress. And so he's like, I'm going to shut you down in 60 days. You have 60 days to cure these problems. And I was like, and he left, and I was like, well, this is a bad day.
Yeah.
Mr. Fire Marshal. And, we want to be safe and comply. I was just flying by the seat of my pants, trying to get some cash flow. And so I went to the bank and I said, hey, this is what I need to do. And the cash flow that was coming in allowed me to borrow like $500,000. And then I took that money and got a guy by the name of John Grieshaber, who had a construction company, and he got me legal. And the city was like, okay, we see that you're doing this, so we're going to give you an extra 60 days. But it's not good to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. But that was my strategy at the time because I didn't have the money. And I haven't done it again. And the fire marshal ended up being my friend, but it took about 4 years.
He warmed up to you.
Kinda.
Yeah.
I don't know if he warmed up to me. But he realized we really wanted to do stuff right. So, and I didn't know all the rules. So one of the lessons there was surround yourself with people who know what they're doing. And, because you don't want to step on a rake and have it whap you in the face.
No. I'd imagine the learning curve was pretty hefty on that one. Building that big, that historic, bringing it up to code to the modern era.
I definitely didn't overthink the project.
Yeah. Definitely didn't.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but I had worked with, my dad was in real estate, my brother's in real estate. The guy I worked for put me in charge of real estate, so I had a background. It was just a new area for me. And I think, my dad being in real estate heavily impacted me about sort of knowing the language, and knowing what to do. But
yeah,
he was always a guy, I went to for advice, and we couldn't work together. My brother worked with him. I couldn't work with him. I think we were too much alike. He was like, hey, you want to come join the family business? And I said, are you going to tell me what to do? And he's like, yeah, I own the company. I'm like, nah, I don't want you telling me what to do. He's like, good, you drive me crazy. And your mom made me ask because I asked your brother. I'm like, you didn't have to tell me that part. So I went to my dad when I was looking at the Butchertown Market building when it was called El Cid. And I said, hey, I found this building. And he goes, oh, cool. Tell me about it. And I said, well, it's 85,000 square feet. And he said, how many parking spots? And I said, 8 parking spots. He's like, wow, 8 parking spots. And he said, how are the windows? I said, it has like 300 windows and they all need to be replaced. And he's like, okay. He's like, how is the heat and air? I said, it doesn't have any heat and air except for that one guy's office. And he said, anything else? And I said, it's across the street from a pig slaughterhouse. And he goes, have you already bought it? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I love it.
I love it.
He was like, that's awesome. I said, Pop, what would you have said if I told you I hadn't bought it yet? He's like, moot point. Yeah. Water under the bridge.
Yeah, right.
He's like, we got to play the hand that's dealt us.
Yeah.
And he was a huge help.
That's amazing.
He was a huge help.
Well, and the optimism, because obviously once you've already, committed to buying the building, you go into problem-solving mode. That's amazing, the mentality that your dad had regarding that.
Oh,
and obviously
great.
you did as
Mr.
well.
Positive.
Mr. Positive.
He was the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah.
You could push him over and he'd keep going.
That's amazing.
And outside the Butchertown Market building, you've had your hands in all sorts of projects around around Butchertown. Currently have your hands in projects. So you could speak to this particularly well. When you initially got involved in the neighborhood, I'm sure, different kind of place than it is now with Louisville FC up the road. We're sitting at 1020 right now, big time success in the form of a brewery. What are like some main before and after shots of what Butchertown was like then, whenever you first got into the neighborhood versus now, outside of the slaughterhouse pieces?
It was rough. I mean, it was rough. It was a great location. There was like sort of, if you're a Louisvillian, you had kind of a natural affinity for Butchertown. It's just, it kind of had some positive cachet, you know? But it was a mess. I mean, it was a mess. And for example, I bought a building where Decade is now, but it was the Butchertown Grocery, and before that, it was the Blind Pig.
Yeah.
And the facade had fallen off the building in the flood, and they had put like aluminum siding, like plastic roofing material, the see-through plastic roofing material, and some aluminum siding, and that was the front of the building. And they put it together with the foam that expands, whatever that's called, you know, Good Stuff or something. I mean, it was like, how horrible can you make this building look? And they were leasing. They had 6 apartments in it, and the guy was leasing apartments for $65 a month. And this is like 2002. And I was trying to acquire real estate in the area, especially the troubled real estate. And there was a guy that was raising pit bulls, so you like couldn't walk in front of the building, and there was a secret grow room for weed, which apparently is okay today, but it wasn't back then. Yeah. And then there were like tons of crack vials. And so I was talking to my mom, because I always talk to my mom about anything I do with real estate, and she's really smart. And she's like, hey, tell me about the building. And I told her, and I said, you know, I found like thousands of glass crack vials. And she was quiet, and she goes, better than a meth house.
That's true.
So she's like,
positivity right there.
You know, she's like the crack vial's half full.
Yeah.
You know, she's very positive. So there is that positivity, but she was looking on the bright side for me. You know, and she was right. It's better than a meth house. You do not want to buy a meth house, for sure. But anyway, that's kind of indicative of, it was a rough neighborhood. And, you know, one property at a time. And, you know, on that one, I had an appraiser come by, because I was trying to, you know, you always get an appraisal before you go to the bank and get the money, and it has to appraise for what you're buying it for. And the appraiser was a friend of mine, and he said, he looked around. This has never happened to me. He said, this property is worth $0. He said it's worth $0. And I said, okay, couple things. You're fired.
Yeah.
And you hurt my feelings. And I hired somebody else, and I got an appraisal that appraised out for what I was buying it for. And this guy was still my friend. He sent me a bill. His bill was worth more than what he said the building was worth.
Yeah.
I paid the bill, and then it became the Blind Pig, and I said, hey, come, I'll buy you lunch. And so he comes, and like, the Blind Pig was cool. It was beautiful. And we did a really good job. The restaurateur did a good job, and we did a good job. And so Ed was there, and we were having lunch, and he looks around, and he says, wow, I can't believe it. And I said, I just wanted to tell you that you were right. It was worth nothing. So
even just thinking back to the Blind Pig days, like that, it was just night and day difference in the neighborhood.
It was the wild west.
That was such a great restaurant.
It was. And then they had meat upstairs, remember? And that got named like the 39th best bar in the world.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And the guy that did that's a guy by the name of Peyton Ray, and he just passed away recently. And, you know, to have the 39th best bar in the world, to create that, was an amazing thing. And think about that talent level that I worked with. To have somebody like that, you know, may he rest in peace. He was a good guy. I was sad to hear the news, but he created an amazing space.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's one of the things about what I try to accomplish is working with like all-stars, working with, the secret to my success is look at my tenants. And we got great tenants that we work with. That's the key.
Yeah. And I mean, for those of you guys listening, you do have a reputation where you do invest in the tenants that you ultimately place in these different places as well. So it is a partnership, and you do value the partnership that you have with all the tenants in your spaces. So
yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the best business model, like from an ROI or, some sort of ratio that you need. It's not necessarily the smartest way to spend money, but it's my company. I'll do what I want.
Yeah, it's done well for you so far.
Yeah, no, it's worked out. I've been lucky.
Yeah.
I really have. It's, it's a lot of luck. I mean, those guys building a $77 million soccer stadium, you can't put that in your business plan.
No. And
I mean, it's crazy.
That's amazing. So kind of on that secondary note, I mean, that stadium opened up the last several years. Obviously, there's still a lot of movement happening in the Butchertown area. I guess, what are you seeing, or what do you think is going to happen over the next several years on the commercial front and residential front in this area, and really the connecting between New Lou and Butchertown and going forward?
I'm very bullish. Like, I think it's going to explode. I think it's going to boom. I think it's going to be wild.
That's a great point. I mean,
yeah, I think it's going to be wild. I mean, I think we've been planting seeds, in the neighborhood. There were people that came before me that started historic preservation. Jim Segrist is a name from the past, and, they made it a historic district. I don't like tearing stuff down. I like saving stuff if it's salvageable. Sometimes it's not. I get preservation. I understand it. I value it. I think it's good business. It sucks up a lot of money up front, a lot of capital, so you gotta, be able to hang. But it's also the fabric of the neighborhood, and it's one of the things that makes us unique. So there were people that came before me that said we ought to save these. So that was critical, right? And then that set it up for us to come in and do, start developing. And we're seeing more and more people wanting to locate here and less available space or opportunity. So I'm like wildly bullish. I think it's going to be amazing.
So you're bullish on the future of Butchertown. It's obviously had a wild ride up to this point since you've gotten involved. And Louisville has an interesting dynamic right now with downtown not being quite as hot as the momentum going on in New Lou and Butchertown. Do you sort of see a shift in momentum away from, definitely right now, but away from downtown? Do you think it'll settle more into these parts? And like, what do you think about this downtown business?
I think it's tough. I mean, I think that there's definitely been a dynamic shift. When the Breonna Taylor stuff went down, and COVID, there's been, like a 1-2 knockout punch, and we had such great momentum that we had been building for so long, and then, all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from under you, and, pressure needed to be released and problems needed to be addressed. But what we saw was, this shift from downtown. A number of people came to us and said, we want to be close, but not there. And I think the issues with downtown are being addressed, and they need to be addressed, and it needs to come back, and it will come back. So there's enough success to go around for everybody. And, we see a lot of positive things happening in the neighborhood, and it'll spill over and join. And, we're getting energy from New Lou right now. And we're getting energy from the stadium, and we're getting energy from downtown. There's just going to be a lot more development in the next 5 years in Butchertown and probably New Lou. And it's kind of maybe for the foreseeable future the place to be. And you always want to build a neighborhood that has some legs, that sort of, if people say, and there are a lot of great places in Louisville that have the DNA of Louisville, but if you want to say, okay, you're here for a day, where do I go? to get a taste of Louisville and see what it's like. And we're still not even close to reaching our potential of what we can be.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of good developers in New Lou and Butchertown, and that's really important. And it's not homogenous. You know, if you look around, we haven't got any national chains, which is like, I think, sort of keeps us true to being a Louisvillian and true to our DNA, because, you know, the pressures of the market want to come in and max out every opportunity. So there'll be people scooping in trying to do stuff, and we kind of have New Lou and Butchertown, you know, sewn up right now, so that they can't necessarily do sort of bad development, I think. So, you know, accidentally we've been smart.
I feel better about downtown Louisville too, because it has such a strong base, and that New Lou and Butchertown are just, it's really close. I mean it's like it's just a stone's throw up the road.
Any other city, we're downtown.
Yeah.
Only in Louisville are we not downtown.
Yeah. And so, and there, it's just such a hot area.
Louisville's peculiar.
It is peculiar.
It's a strange place.
It is a strange place. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got a weird dynamic, but
It's odd, but
yeah.
kind of in a good way,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So one of the questions I had was related to some of the projects that you're currently working on, and you know, what are some of the things that you're actively working on that you're kind of proud of, that you want like to, you know, kind of tell people about what you're doing. So,
I mean, you know, I always talk about Work the Metal and what's happened with Work the Metal, and my business partner, Jack Mathis, who's the CFO of my real estate company. And he had this idea to start this retail company because he wanted to build a retail store that he wanted to shop at, and he felt like there wasn't anything that fit the bill in Louisville. So we have been able to, you know, we've started in like 600 square feet, and we owned workthemetal.com, which is why it's named Work the Metal. And we started in like 600 square feet, and now we have over 15,000 square feet. I mean, it's wild. And he's a brilliant guy, and he's surrounded himself with really talented people, which is always a key. And he's been able to grow every year. And so the majority of stuff he does is good. There's some stuff that hasn't worked, but you know, we have the luxury of trying stuff. So I think we've become one of the go-to places in Louisville, especially for people from out of town, to check it out and say, hey, this store is funky, and it's, you know, chic, and it's affordable, and it's got weird stuff, and it's fun, and, you know, you can get a drink, and
Yeah.
and, you know, let's check it out, which is, you know, I don't know, it's hard to build icons, right? Like, you can't say I'm going to build an icon, but stuff becomes icons, and I've been lucky because I've been able to be attached to some icons. You know, we did the Holy Grail in the Grail House is, you know, a cool project that we did with Laurie Beck and Tyler Trotter, and, you know, those guys were amazing to work with. And, you know, I would put that beer bar up, you know, in the Grail House as one of the highest quality places in Louisville. That's a great experience. And so to try and build icons is, you know, one of the, and like I said, I have great tenants, but, you know, Big Nita's Cheesecake, I don't know if you've noticed, you know, they went into Butcher Block, which is sort of my strip center. You know, Butchertown Market is my mall in my mind. And so they went into one of the spaces of Butcher Block, which is on Story and East Main. And when they're open, they have a line of people every time they're open, and they sell out every time they're open. It's crazy.
Man.
And they have limited production because they're in a 1,400 square foot building, and they can only do what they can do. But it's sort of like the quality is so good. And, you know, my stepmother-in-law is the one that found them, Artist Wells. And so I give her a shout out. She's like my most productive real estate employee that doesn't work for me. And so she saw them and said, hey, you got to check these guys out. And I lived in the neighborhood, and they had a 200 square foot space, a 200 square foot space. That's like a closet. And there would be people out the door every Sunday because they were open from like 10 to 12. So anyway, it's just, and the way we got them is I tried her cheesecake and I was like, you qualify.
You qualify. Yeah. You got a good product.
You're in.
Yeah.
Can't beat
Not
some
a
cheesecake.
good, like crazy good.
Yeah.
Like crazy creative in her product offerings. I mean, so she's a fun person to work with.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then just this building, it took me 4 years to buy this building from Mr. Dryden. And I think it was his daughter came in to work the metal, and she said, hey, my dad might be interested in selling his property. So long story short, I called him every week, and he said, I will sell you the building if you stop calling me every week. And I said, I don't think I can stop. I couldn't stop calling him. I think I have a problem.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you're
anyway,
persistent. Yeah,
I
you're
called him, and then he sold me the building, and I said to my wife at the time, when I came home, she's like, how did it go? And I said, well, good news and bad news. She's like, what's the good news? I said, I got the building. She said, what's the bad news? I said, I bought a frozen meat company because he wouldn't sell the building without the business.
Oh, yeah. So you were operating a frozen meat company for a while there.
Luckily, I was able to flip it
Okay, nice.
to a friend of mine who owns Creation Gardens,
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Ron Tenier.
Cool.
So that was lucky.
And now
I don't want to own a frozen meat company.
I don't
That's
either.
not my highest and best use.
Yeah.
No, I don't either.
Meat popsicles,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool for Butchertown.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe.
I mean, you've definitely repurposed the space to one that's become, like you said, an anchor
Well,
for this area.
Sure,
so.
the guys at 1020 did that. I sold them the building.
Sure.
And they did a great job. So, again, they had the vision, and they did a beautiful job finishing it, and they have great beer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's like, when you have something like that, there's a ripple effect. There's that kind of modern building across the street. And those guys came to me, and they're like, they bought the lot at the courthouse steps, and they're like, hey, we want to build this building. We want to build a house, a spec house, and sell it. And you're sort of the expert on Butchertown. And I said, okay, what do you want to sell? What will you have to sell it for? And they said $400,000. And I said, never going to happen. There's no way that happens. Officially, it doesn't happen. You're like, don't do it. And so they did it. And then they came to me because they sold it almost immediately. And they're like, hey, we sold it for $415,000. And I said, I told you couldn't sell it for $400,000.
That's awesome.
That's good
Cover
stuff.
your tracks. I mean, I think, like you said, there's been a lot of catalysts in the area that have supported that type of growth, and I'm just glad that you had the foresight, not necessarily even the foresight, but you're willing to take the risk to take on this project. And again, over time, there's been a lot of investment in the area, and we're just excited to see what happens over the next several
me too.
years.
I've been super lucky.
Yeah.
Like really and truly, like not humble bragging. I've been super lucky. And that's the thing, and it mitigates risk. So,
Yeah. Butchertown is booming, and the mayor says it's going higher in the next 5 to 10 years. So stay tuned. Stay tuned, everybody. Lot to love
pump it
here.
up, pump it
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
The roof.
Yeah, the roof is on fire.
Fire!
Andy, we appreciate you coming on, man. This has been awesome. I think we've got more than enough to go with here. Yeah,
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming to Butchertown.
absolutely. Yeah, we'll stay a while.
Yeah.
Hey, talk to everybody soon.